I'll be sharing on what I've captioned 7 years of harvest. 7 years of harvest. 7 years of harvest. Genesis chapter 39. We'll be reading a couple of verses. Genesis chapter 39. From verse 1, it says, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh," take note of the details, "captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither." Make sure you are genuine with me with your Bible. It says that Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. So here we see the story of Joseph being brought down to Egypt. And it says Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites. Now we must always take notice of what the Bible emphasizes. The Bible is so intentional in the things it gives details about. So it could have said that, and Potiphar bought him of their hands of the Ishmaelites. He could have said Potiphar, a captain, bought him of their hands of the Ishmaelites. But it says Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. So it's giving us details of who Potiphar is. It says captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him off the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. It means that when you see Potiphar, you must have in mind this is someone who is connected to Pharaoh. You must have in mind that Potiphar is not just a name associated with itself. The Bible wants you to see Potiphar and think Pharaoh. Verse 2, it says, "And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian." The Bible is talking about the Joseph who has been bought as though a commodity, a slave. He has been bought. And he starts verse 2 by saying, "The Lord was with him." The Lord was with this guy who has just been bought as a slave. He's telling you that if you find Joseph, who is now a slave in Potiphar's house, you will find the Lord with him. The Lord was with Joseph. Preach it to your neighbor. Tell your neighbor, say, "The Lord was with Joseph." And it says that, "And he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian." This guy who is not the one buying, this guy who is the one who is bought, it said that the Lord is with him, and yet it says that he was prosperous. The one who was a slave, the Bible says he was prosperous. It didn't say Potiphar was prosperous. It says Joseph, the slave, was prosperous. So the next verse will be, "And he dwelt in his own house." No, it says, "And he dwelt in his master's house." So even though you could not find the possession of Joseph being mentioned, that Joseph had a house, the Bible said that this Joseph, who was a slave, the Lord was with him, and he was prosperous, being in his master's house. He was an Egyptian. Verse 3 says, "And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand." So this is not a case of just Joseph talking about it. The Bible says that his master now could see that the Lord is with his slave. His master could see that he has a slave that has the Lord with him, and that whatever this slave does, the Lord makes it to prosper. Here is a boss who can look at his employee and see that the Lord is with him, and that whatever this my employee does, the Lord makes it prosper. It says, and Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him and made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. Verse 5. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. Very interesting. Joseph, who now has left his father's house, is said to be prosperous, staying in his master's house. And the Lord was with him, and his master could see that the Lord was with him, and his master could notice that whatever Joseph does, the Lord makes it to prosper. And he said that the Lord blessed the house of the Egyptian, of Potiphar, because of Joseph's sake. So now you will have the house of Potiphar being blessed, and Potiphar can see it and recognize that things are not working well in my business because of me. Things are working well in my business because of the slave I have gotten. Because of this person I have employed, things are working well. He says the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. So here is Potiphar prospering because he has a prosperous Joseph with him. Here's my question: who is prospering because of you? Who is prospering because of you? Whose life is increasing because of you? I know we are going to the 7 years of harvest, but I want us to begin from where it started really. Who is prospering because of you? Can we get to your office and your boss will say that things are advancing in our company because of you? Because we have engaged you, we can see that the Lord is with us and he's blessing all that we do. You might not be the owner of the business, but be responsible for the prosperity of the business. It might not be yours, it might not be for your father. You might be like Joseph, who in the hierarchy he's a slave there. But can your business be prospering because of you? Can your boss look at you and see that the Lord is with you? Because you see, this work, all the other people have given to do this kind of work, every time they touch it, there's an excuse. Things don't seem to go well. They don't get this scatters. But you, as for you, anytime you touch it, somehow things are done well. Somehow we achieve the right results. Can your boss look at you and see that the Lord is with you? He says his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper. So this is not just you prospering those who are beneath you. It's not a big deal for you to make the life of someone lower than you better. No, it's not a big deal. But who ahead of you is getting better because of you? Who is it that is in a better state? That if we want to start the story, we don't start with you, we start with the Potiphar. We describe the Potiphar, the guy who is with the king, the guy who is a captain. Who ahead of you is getting better, is advancing in life because of you. You must shift your scope from just improving the lives of those beneath you, those at your level, to now targeting people ahead of you. That I can improve the lives of those who have already gone ahead of me. This is a very important mindset as we journey to the 7 years of harvest. If you remember, Jesus told about the parable of the talents, how one person was given 5, another 2, another 1. The one who had his 1 could see the others with 2 and 5 and realize that no, these people are better. And so because he saw they were better, he did nothing with his own. Until the master came and he discovered that what he had was going to improve the one that had more. This is how the Bible put it. When the master came, he took his one and he used it to reward the one that had 5, which meant that his one was going to be a blessing to a person that had more. There's something in your one that can improve the life of the person that has 5. There's something in your little that can make the one who has plenty better. There's something in your emptiness that can make the one who has plenty to become full. So who ahead of you is getting better because of you? Ask your neighbor that. Say, who ahead of you is getting better because of you? Ask another neighbor. Your first neighbor was boring. Ask another neighbor. Say, who ahead of you is getting better because of you? So there's a blessing in you who lacks everything that someone who has everything needs. You who looks at yourself and feels like you don't have anything, there's a blessing in you who lacks everything that someone who has everything needs, is craving for. Now let's keep a couple of verses and jump to verse 20. So the same Genesis 39. Now we're in verse 20. It says that, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Let me pause there and we'll continue. It says, now you remember the story. I don't want to focus too much on some of the details, but remember how Potiphar's wife was interested in Joseph, and then he did not agree, and so she framed him up, and then he was thrown into prison. Now we are told in verse 20 that Joseph's master, that's Potiphar, took him and put him into the prison. But the Bible is not quiet there. He wants to give you some gist about the prison. He says, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. So Joseph is not just put in any prison at all. He's put in a particular prison that matters to the king. This is a prison that only the king's prisoners should be kept. He says it's a place where the king's prisoners were bound. If that was the only prison, he would have stated it. He would have just said that Joseph was put in prison, full stop. But he said he was put in prison, a place. This particular prison is where the king's prisoners were bound. Now, this will make you understand Genesis 39, verse 1, the beginning scripture. It makes you understand who Potiphar was. That Potiphar was a worker of Pharaoh. It says that an officer of Pharaoh, a captain of the army. Now we are understanding why we're giving that description of who Potiphar was. What it means is that if you do something against Potiphar, it's as though you have done something against Pharaoh, the king. When you offend Potiphar, it is as though you have offended the king. So we will find you put in a place where the king's prisoners are kept. Why am I emphasizing on this? You see, sometimes you don't understand the people God brings around you. They might not be the king, but they are people who associate with the king. Your boss might not be the ultimate person you are dreaming of. It might not be your mentor in life. It might not be the person you really look up to, that you study their material. But you see, your boss can be a person God has brought to you that is close to the person you want to get to. Your boss can be the Potiphar who is close to a Pharaoh. The way you treat your Potiphar would be as though you have treated Pharaoh that way. There are people you are praying to meet that you don't understand that those who God has brought your way is a ladder to meet them. There can be someone sitting by you in church today that person is a ladder God has just placed to get to who you want to meet. But the person does not look like it. But he's not just a Potiphar. He's a Potiphar who is an officer of Pharaoh. So now we see that Joseph is put in a prison that belongs to the king. Now we continue, verse 21. It says, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Here again, the Bible tells us that the Lord was with Joseph. He has just told you that Joseph has been put in the prison, but he's telling you that God was with this guy that has just been put in prison. God is associating with this prisoner. It says, and God showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Verse 22, and the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. Now, this verse can be so inspiring, depending on how you look at it. Now, we are just told that he was shown favor, mercy. You might think it then meant that after that, he was able to, the keeper of the prison was able to understand the story of Joseph proper. And so he went to go and meet Potiphar to explain to him the reality of it. No, he established his place in the prison. He was not leaving. Now he put him in charge of the prisoners, and he says that whatever they did in the prison, whatever the prisoners did, he says Joseph was the doer of it. This is important. Joseph was the doer of whatever they did in the prison. What it meant is that if you come and you are told that the prisoners have done this, what the Bible is telling you that actually it is Joseph that did it. He was the doer of whatever they did in the prison. Whilst this might sound beautiful if you are just reading it from the Bible, if you want to look at it practically, what do prisoners do? Prisoners do not sit down to come and deliberate and have business meetings and discuss how they are going to move the economy forward. In the prison, when you go there, you'll be cleaning the floor, you'll be cutting grass, you'll be tidying places. Sometimes we see our prisoners, they bring them out. You don't see them bring the prisoners out and then they are playing Jama music, and then you see them come out with suit and tie. No, you see them with their blue and with cutlass. That is the work they do. And the Bible said that if you find the prisoners doing something, Joseph was a doer of it. It meant that Joseph was not shying away from doing the trivial things. Before we get to the 7 years of harvest, you must have a mindset that even in the little things, be the doer of it. Don't be a person who, when it comes to trivial things to do, you back away. When you're in your office, when you're at home, things that look despicable, be the doer of it. Tell your neighbor, say, be the doer of it. And it continues in verse 23. It says that the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So we saw Joseph a prosperous slave. Now we are seeing Joseph a prosperous prisoner. As a slave, he was prosperous. Now as a prisoner, he's prosperous. At every level of your life, become prosperous. Prosper at every level of your life. As a prisoner, prosper. As a slave, prosper. As a shoemaker, prosper. As a carpenter, prosper. As a businessman, prosper. Every level life finds you, prosper. It says, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So Joseph he had a prosperous prison. You see, sometimes you can look at the level in which you are in and pray for a prosperity to come. No, prosper the level where you are. God, I'm crying for prosperity. What you mean is, God, bring another level to me. But before the other level comes, this level where you are, have you prospered with it? God, give me prosperity. I need 10,000 Ghana cedis. Powerful. The 100 Ghana cedis you have, prosper in it first. Be a prosperous owner of 100 Ghana cedis before you get to the level where you want to prosper with 1,000 Ghana cedis. Then prosper with 10,000. Then with 1,000,000. Prosper at every level where you are. That what you will do with 100 cedis, we will see it prosper. what you would do with 1,000 Ghana cedis. Others who have 1,000 Ghana cedis will look at you and ask, how is it possible that you are able to do this with just 1,000 Ghana cedis? We will need 10,000 Ghana cedis to do this thing, but you with 1,000 you have done it. How is it that you who have 10,000 Ghana cedis have achieved this project? Something that we need 100,000 Ghana cedis to do. At whatever level you are, prosper. Please help me preach again to your neighbor. Say, at whatever level you are, prosper. So Joseph learned to prosper in little things. Now let's go to Genesis chapter 40, the next chapter. In verse 6, it says, and Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. Now this is talking about the prisoners of the king. Remember, we've told that this is the king's prison. So the king has sent his butler and his baker, the chief butler and the baker, to prison. He had imprisoned them. Now in verse 6 it says, and Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and he looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. That's the king's prisoners. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his Lord's house, saying, wherefore look ye so sadly today? Very interesting. Joseph comes and he sees them, the prisoners. He sees them sad. And then he goes to ask them, why is it that you are so sad today? Here is my question to Joseph. Are you not in the prison? Are you not supposed to be sad? It shouldn't look strange that people in the prison are sad. It should look confusing that you find prisoners happy. He's coming and he's seeing people that have just been in prison, the chief butler and the baker, and he's interested in finding out, why are you sad? You should not be sad. But Joseph, you are in the prison, but still you should not be sad. Joseph is trying to redefine what the atmosphere should be like in the prison. That even though you are in the prison, I want to ensure that the prison is a place you have joy. I want to ensure that the prison is a place where you are full of excitement. You must be a person who meets everyone around you and can trigger joy in them. That in this kind of situation, it doesn't look like a situation where people should expect happiness, but for you, you can create happiness out of it. This point is so important. Now we jump and go to Genesis chapter 41. Genesis chapter 41. In verse 1, it says that then it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he stood by the river. It says it came at the end of 2 full years. What 2 full years is this calculating? It's calculating 2 years from the point when the king had released his own prisoners. So the chief baker and killed one, and the butler. And after these 2 full years, Joseph had been in the prison, and we had not heard anything about Joseph. Nothing was heard about Joseph for 2 full years. So let's keep ourselves updated. What was the last thing we should know or have heard about Joseph? Is that Joseph had the Lord with him in prison. So the Lord was with Joseph in prison, and the Lord made him prosper in prison. This is our updates from the last 2 years. Nothing had changed. So the Lord was with him and the Lord made him to prosper. It did not mean Joseph was out of the prison. For 2 years, the person who had God with him and the person who was prospering by the hand of God was still in prison for 2 years. Then it says, and after 2 full years, that's when Pharaoh had a dream. Now let me skip to verse 8. I'm doing all this because of time. It says, and it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, talking about Pharaoh, And he sent and he called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream. It says, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. It says, Pharaoh was wroth with his servants and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, put me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and him. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. Verse 13, and it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto my office, and him he hanged. Let me stop here. It says that when Pharaoh called all the magicians and all the wise men, and he told them the dream, he said none of them could interpret it. None of them could help him out. Then the chief butler now said, I've made a mistake. There is this particular man that we met in the prison when you sent us to your prison, that Potiphar's own. He says the one that belonged to the captain of the guard. He says when you sent us to that particular one, we met a certain man there who interpreted our dreams. He said to each man their own. He says that, and it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto my office, and him he hanged. Very interesting, the Bible is telling us. It's trying to make us understand that the interpretation of Joseph, their dream, the interpretation Joseph gave to the dream, made the dream become a reality. He didn't say that after that I was restored because I dreamt. No, he said, I was restored because Joseph interpreted that dream. It's not enough to have the dream. Having the dream does not create the reality. It's having the interpretation of the dream. He says, it's as he interpreted, so it was. Not as I dreamed, so it was. As he interpreted. Just as a side note, when you dream, have the interpretation. It's not in the fact that you saw the vision, it's in the fact that you hold the interpretation. That is what brings it to life. He says, me he restored, not me my dream restored, me Joseph restored. King, I was not restored because of you, I was restored because of Joseph. And he says, and him he hanged. Verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph and brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. So we see that at the level where Joseph was in prison, he had a fellow prisoner who was with him, the chief butler and the baker. They were with him together in prison. They were at the same level. But yet, Joseph ensured he served them right with the gift God has given him. Now, the people that were at the same level with him left him and went ahead. Their story changed, but Joseph was still left there. Things became better for them, but Joseph was still left there. But they could remember after 2 years that the reason we are ahead is because Joseph pushed us ahead. The chief butler says, I am not where I am today just like that. There was someone I met at that low place that lifted me. He is the reason I was restored. He restored me. He made me better. Now we are about to see Joseph changing level because he changed someone's level. His level is about to change because when he was low, he had changed another one's level. You see, Joseph was never on his own going to have the ability to get to the palace. It was not in him to get there. He was not an Egyptian, so he was a slave. But there was someone by him who had the ability to get to where Joseph was not going to. But Joseph's ability to change and help that person is what took him to that place. There are places in life you might never ever get to by yourself. There are places in life that are not open to you, but are open to the person seated by you. There are doors of opportunity that don't have your name on it. They have the person, your colleague at work's name on it. When you push that person into that level, he pulls you into that level. When you open the door of the palace to that person, he gets you there. Mordecai, you will never ever in your life get to the palace. But get Esther there, we will find you there also. Mordecai, you are at the gate. That is where you are. But Mordecai, as a gate man, become a prosperous gate man. Prosper in your gate position. Have an Esther you are taking care of and prosper. Every day be able to look at Esther and see that you are prospering. See that you have elevated her life. See that she's now becoming better. See that you have an Esther who is not acting as a gate man's daughter. See, you have an Esther who is operating as though she's a queen, even though she comes to meet you at the gate. And then get Esther to get to the king's place, whilst you, Mordecai, are still waiting at the gate. When Esther gets to the king's palace, they don't ask her to bring Mordecai. No, he still stays at the gate. But Mordecai, a time is coming where the one you lifted will lift you also. So now Joseph has been brought to a place with the king because of how he handled his place in the prison. He's now in the palace, not because he was dreaming of the palace, but because he made the prison a palace. He ensured that the prison was a place of joy. Now he has been ushered into the palace. Now we skip to verse 28. So at this time, the Pharaoh had explained the dream to Joseph. I'm trying to skip verses so that I don't dwell on certain points that would take time. But Joseph had explained Pharaoh had explained to Joseph his dream. Basically, in summary, it was that Pharaoh had seen 7 fat cows that were well fed and were feeding, and all of a sudden 7 skinny, ugly cows came, and the skinny, ugly cows ate the fat cows. What a strange dream to have. Yeah, some people say it's like a cartoon, because you see a slim cow eating a fat cow. And after that, the same thing happened when he saw some grains. There were the ones that were blossoming well, and then after that, the ones that were dried up came and swallowed the ones that were blossoming. And so he was worried, what is the meaning of this? So remember, backtrack, that we are where we are because the chief butler had brought in Joseph to Pharaoh. So now Joseph is speaking to Pharaoh. He said, this is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. He says, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land, and the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. A scary interpretation. He's telling Pharaoh, this thing you have dreamed is something the Lord is about to do. That introduction is very careful, it's very necessary, that you don't think it's the devil that's about to do this thing, lest you will start praying against the devil. He said, this thing is the Lord is showing what he is about to do. And he tells them basically there's going to be 7 years of harvest, great harvest, things are just going to be blossoming. And after that, 7 years of great famine, where it will look as though the harvest never happened, that the type of harvest will be forgotten. And yet he says this is what the Lord is about to do. When Elder Parker was reading there, I think Isaiah 45 from verse 7, he says that I, the Lord, I also create evil. He says, I, the Lord, do it. I, the Lord, I do it. Lest you will think it's not I, the Lord. He says, I, the Lord, I do it. So he says, there is this famine that is going to come after a great harvest. Now, verse 33, Joseph is about to give to Pharaoh the solution to it. For there is no temptation, that's what he's saying, for there is no temptation that has come unto man, but such as is common. He says, but God is faithful, who will not let you to be tempted beyond that you are able, but will with the temptation make a way of escape, that you are able to bear it. So before I hit it, it's telling you that what God does is that God never allows you to hit a challenge that you can't handle. But within the challenge is the solution that makes you handle, bear that challenge. So now we hit verse 33. It says, now therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay upon under the hand of Pharaoh. He says, and let them keep food in the cities, and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. So now he's telling him that this thing God is about to do, the way out of it is to get a particular wise man. This man would have the wisdom and understanding of how to handle these 7 years of harvest that the Lord is about to bring. And what this guy will do within the time of harvest is such that when you get into a time of famine, what happened in the time of harvest will make sure that the time of famine still looks like a time of harvest. That now in the time of famine, it still looks like in harvest. That 7 years of harvest can become 14 years of harvest if you have the right man. Then Pharaoh looked at this and he said, no, it has to be this, you Joseph. Because the chief butler told me that whilst he was in prison, what he encountered in prison is what me, the king, will need. He came whilst I was confused, getting all the magicians and all the astrologers, all the wise men. He came and he told me, he said, oh Pharaoh, what I experienced in the prison is what you need in the palace. And the summary of it was a man. And so Joseph, if you are that man, you are the one I need to appoint. That is why I needed to start the beginning of Joseph, because the 7 years of harvest begin with the man Joseph. So we needed to go from Genesis 39 and not from Genesis 41, because the harvest started from that man. Who was that man? He was a man that was brought into, quote unquote, 7 years of harvest in Potiphar's house. So the Lord told us, the Bible tells us that Potiphar was a prosperous man. He had things, he had goods. There were a lot of things present in Potiphar's house. This was a house of harvest. And he said this man had so much. And because of Joseph, even what he had began to increase. God began to prosper. Within the harvest, there was more harvest. He said it was such that Potiphar left everything in the hands of Joseph. He did not need to care about anything. Everything was in the hands of Joseph apart from his wife. So Joseph became the manager of 7 years of harvest. is called Potiphar's house. He was able to manage harvest. And after that, then we see all of a sudden, he says the Lord was with him in that harvest as a slave. Then after that, we are told again that the Lord was with him, but now it's no longer 7 years of harvest. Now it's 7 years of famine. It's called he was sent to prison. When now we are not told about the things in the prison, we are told about the plenty in Potiphar's house, but in the prison we are not told of anything there. We are told of the work. Whatever they did, he was the doer of it. So now, and he says the prisoner, the keeper of the prison, he left everything in the hands of Joseph. So now Joseph is managing a time of famine, a period of sadness. And yet we saw how he handled that period of famine. He handled it in a way that if he comes and meets you in famine sad, he will ask you, how can you be sad? He brought joy in a place of sadness. He brought joy in a place of pain. He brought prosperity in the prison. Whatever he did, he prospered. So in a time of famine, in a time of prison, we saw a prosperous prison. Now you will understand why the Lord will have to be with him as a slave and as a prisoner. He says the Lord was with him. Please preach your neighbor. Say the Lord is with you. Come on, preach it like a serious prophet. Say the Lord is with you. So he was in charge of these years of harvest and famine. So now he has been ushered into this grand scheme in the palace. But he that was faithful in a little will be entrusted in much. Your little is a prototype of the great. The little God gives you is a prototype of the great he's about to bring your way. Don't despise the little you have. It is an example of that great thing God is bringing your way. Find how to exercise dominion over that little. He's showing you how you will manage the great that is coming. And so he says, when you have harvest, it's not for eating. Your harvest is to keep aside for 7 years of famine. God is indeed going to bring that years of famine. But what you do with your plenty will ensure whether you continuously live in harvest. Listen, in life there are always the 7 years of harvest and 7 years of famine. You will not always have in life a time when things are always flowing into your pocket. It doesn't happen. Throughout scriptures, it doesn't happen. That always things are just entering your pocket. Always things just enter your pocket. Oh, the Lamba, we saw the children of Israel. God kept on feeding them day and night, day and night, day and night. It tells you the moment they stepped into the promised land, the manna ceased. As they got there, boom, no manna again. God does not always bring that way. At a point in time, the people came and met Jesus. They say, "You are the one that multiplied the bread and fishes. Multiply it again." He did not mind them. He ran away from them. He had told them, gather the fragments. If you needed it again, go for the fragments. So, in your life, there will be a time when money is just flowing. Things are just flowing. What would you do in that time of harvest, that 7 years of harvest? Don't eat everything. Keep aside. Because a time is coming where your mobile money will not be ringing as it was ringing at a point in time. And yet your mobile money account can still be fat. Because when money was flowing, you had the wisdom to keep aside for years ahead. And this harvest was such that in the time when indeed God brought famine, Egypt had enough to feed other nations. Other nations could come to Egypt because there was harvest. So in the midst of famine, there was harvest. Say, in the midst of famine, there is harvest. Said inside the famine is harvest. Why inside the famine there's harvest? The Bible tells us that the 7 fat cows were eaten by the 7 slim skinny ones. The skinny ones represented famine. So it means if you're looking for the fat cows, you find them inside the slim ones. The fat cows are located in the slim ones. The harvest is located in famine. So in famine, in the midst of the skinny cows, you must open the skinny cows because the fat cows are there. The cows look skinny, but inside it are the fat cows. The season looks tough, but inside it is breakthrough. Things might look hard, but inside it is your miracle. In the midst of the 7 years of famine, you can open it and encounter 7 years of harvest. Can you please rise up on your feet? A God that was with Joseph, that made him prosper. One counsel we have is not to despise little beginnings. Don't despise it. Prosper in your little beginnings. Prosper in your small things. Prosper in your 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. Prosper in your little oil in your house. Prosper in that small assignment given you. That I can be abandoned even by family, and yet I will prosper. Listen, family might not always be there for you. Blood is thicker than water. Sometimes blood can become so light. Sometimes your greatest strength might not really be family. Sometimes you can look at family, look at parents, look at siblings, look at your husband or wife, and not find the help. They might even be the ones that abandon you, but still prosper. I don't have the best of family, but still prosper. I seem to be alone in Egypt, but prosper. My boss does not like me. It shouldn't stop me from prospering. They have framed me up at work. They lied against me. Now I have been punished for a crime I did not know. In the midst of false allegations, prosper. Can you just say, Father, I receive the grace to prosper at all levels.